Well, welcome everybody to my presentation on the Commodore Super PET. I'm Rudy Panigas. I have a YouTube channel called Rudy's Retro Intel, and today we'll talk about a little bit about the Commodore Super PET. Anybody here own a Super PET? I know Dave has one. Oh, excellent. Uh, I just got one in April, thanks to Dave's hunting around. He was looking for some drives, and he ended up finding a PET. I said, Rudy, you got to get this PET. It's like, yes. So I picked it up, and then
To my defense,
yes,
it's in beautiful cosmetic shape.
yes, it's very, very, very nice. It looks like museum quality. The case is excellent, but unfortunately, everything was broken inside. So this is part of the journey because I didn't know anything about repairing super pets. I've done the other pets like the 4032, 8032, 2001, all the other pets, but I've never worked on one. So this is a bit of my journey. Um, let's see here. So the Commodore Super PET. So the Commodore Super PET was created in 1981. It had two processors, a 6502, which is in all the other pets, and the VIC-20s, but it also has a Motorola 6809 processor, so you can switch between the two. Has 96K of memory, a serial port, like a true serial port, not like the serial port on the Commodore 64. It's a proprietary serial. It's not the RS-232, but this has the actual, standard RS-232 port, and it comes with multiple language, basic, which is part of the 8032 side. There's the Waterloo, APL, Fortran, Cobalt, and Pascal, and there's an editor. And it was developed with the University of Waterloo here in Canada. So I'm sorry, Dave, can you see my back? Yeah. What's in the Super PET? There's an 8032 motherboard. So basically it's an 8032 with some modifications to the board. There's two of them, which we'll get into. And then there's two versions of the Super PET. So the older version has three boards, meaning that there's a 8032 board, which is the main board. We'll call it the motherboard. And then there's two additional boards that go on top, and we'll look at that in a moment. And then the newer one only has one board. So sorry, it's called a two board Super PET, which has again the 8032 and another board that sits on top. We talked about that. And this is the 8032. So this is the main board you would see on the bottom of the Super PET. You see this in the 8032 and the 4032. The 8032 has 4 RAM chips, where the 4032 only has 2. But if you added 2 more RAM chips and changed the jumpers, where are they on here? The jumper wires on here, you can actually turn your 4032 PET into an 80 column, which is the 8032. So here's different boards. So like I was mentioning, the older one, or the so-called original one, the first one out, had three boards. So the one we saw before was the 8032. Then on top of that was this other smaller board. It had a connector that connected the power supply directly into this board, and then another wire that go down to the lower board, and a third one would go up to the third board up here. The lower board has the CPUs and the serial port. It's got all the ROMs for the Super PET side, and the upper board is basically memory. The next generation of the Super PET, they combined the two boards into one. So you had them again, the 8032 board, and then this would sit on top, and this had the serial port, the RAMs, the 3 ROMs, and the 2 processors. Is a much smaller design, which was a lot more efficient, although they both generate quite a bit of heat, but this one actually will generate less. And it's nice because it has these holes on the side. And what that's for is underneath on the 8032 where the voltage regulators are, they generate a lot of heat. So this actually lets the heat pass through and not get stuck underneath the board. Well, how do you access the 8032 side, the Super PET side? Well, you have these switches, and the switches allow you to select 6502, which is the regular 8032 PET, or you switch it to 6809 mode, it's a toggle. and that gives you access to the additional language and so on. There's additional switches here for read, write, and programming. When I was working on it, I only used the read, write. I'm not a big developer, so I wouldn't be using the others. Okay, so the 8032. So in order to get an 8032 working as a Super PET, you have to make two mods. I learned this the hard way because my Super PET, when I thought it was broken, I actually believe it was working, but it wouldn't work on my board because I didn't have this modification. And what this does, they're taking a signal off an IC here and they're passing all the way up to the socket where the CPU sits. Now the socket where the CPU sits has a cable that plugs into the CPU socket and it goes up to the second board and it plugs in, right? So on the CPU, there's a pin that's not being used. So what Commodore, they were pretty smart about it, is they actually took the signal they needed from this chip, brought it up to the CPU, and then that cable would bring it up to the second board and it could use the signal. So my board wasn't working. My Super PET, I got the 8032 fixed and that was great, but every time I put in the Super PET board, it would not work. Then David was generous enough to give me a bunch of broken Super PET boards and an 8032 board that he had, and I found out that it would work on his but not mine. And then I talked to another friend of mine, Chuck Hutchins. He said, well, have you looked at the bottom of the board? There's a wire. It's like, what are you talking about? So of course, look at the bottom. It's like, oh, there's a wire missing. So I put that in, and I still didn't get it. Wasn't working, but not quite right. And then after more investigation, I thought, okay, what is different between my board and David's board? So I pulled out, the first thing I did is I pulled out, let's see, I'm going to pull all the socketed chips. And I pulled out the character ROM from David's board, plugged into mine, it worked. It's like, okay, mine is working, but it's not working. That's very strange. After much more investigation, the character ROM for the Super PET is actually a ROM that's divided into two. The ROM has two sets of ROMs in it. Half of the ROM is the 8032 side, so it's the PETSCII characters. The other half of the ROM is ASCII character set, which is required for the Super PET side. The Super PET side only uses ASCII, not the PET ASCIIs. So that's the other second mod that is required. So one thing I realized that before you're doing any more repairs on a Super PET, make sure your 8032 board is fully working and configured properly. So Super PET boards. So here's a quick diagram or slide of my Super PET. It had wires on there that didn't belong there. Someone was in there that cut traces on the board. They made some weird. They removed some of the bodge wires or jumper wires, whatever you want to call it, from the board, so nothing was working properly. And after looking at David's board, even though his boards were not working, I was able to find he had the same revision as mine, so I basically followed his traces or jumper wires, put them in. I put in the capacitor that was missing. This bodge wire was there. This one was not. That one was removed, so that was not there, and these two were soldered in incorrectly. So more time and investigation, figuring, well, okay, what's the right way, what's the wrong way? The problem was I didn't have a working Super PET board to compare to, although Dave's boards were not working either. So I figured, okay, a bit of both. Maybe we can mix a bit of this, mix a bit of that, put in the blender and get something working. And yeah, then I came up with this manual actually. So while working on this online, I was checking everywhere and I couldn't find any manual other than the manual for the schematics. And I mean, that's great, but the manual, it's from Commodore. It doesn't tell you that you have to modify the 8032. It doesn't tell you have to use a special character ROM. It doesn't tell you about jumper wires or bodge wires that are required on the Super PET boards. And it doesn't mention that there's different versions. There's a version A, B. Well, the first version doesn't have a number, as far as I'm aware of. The smaller board or the combined boards have a version A, B, and D. I've worked on all three. I haven't worked on a C. I haven't found any, but so they don't mention these. So unless you know about the bodge wires, you're going to be in a bit of a trouble. So based on that, I decided to put everything I've learned. I did over 50 different experiments with my board, and I figured I'm going to put it all together and make a manual. And so when I put what I've learned together in a manual, I actually used my manual to fix Dave's. He had 3 boards. 2 were the newer ones, and 1 was the original, the older ones. So basically what I've done is I made a manual that's kind of like a picture guide, I guess, lack of a better word. So basically you see this on your screen, you just read what it says. Okay, Super PET only shows a complete green screen and boot up. This is true for either mode. Well, okay, we'll check this U19 chip. This tells you what it is, and then you just you can replace it or just monitor it, or monitor the signals with an oscilloscope and determine if it needs to be removed. Another example, turn Super PET on, 6502 or 6809 mode, you're getting garbage on the screen. Then it says check U6 and U40, which is these 2 chips. These are just samples of the garbage screen. I mean, it can be something very similar to this. You'll know when you see it that it's not 100%. The next thing is, okay, you got it working. Yay, it's coming up. But no, it's the 6502 mode won't boot. But when you switch to the 6809 mode, the Super PET mode, you get the menu. But the menu looks weird. Like, why is Waterloo with a small W and Select has missing a weird S at the front and the letters don't look right? Well, if you follow the manual, then just go to U2 and replace that or U5. So based on all these different scenarios, I put them, like I said, in the manual. Let's see here, what's the next? Let's talk about the next part. So memory. So if you run a diagnostics program on the Super PET, or actually any PET, it will look at the memory on the main board, the 8032 board, or if you have a 4032 or whatever PET you have, it will run on that. But you need a special program that will access the additional RAM on the Super PET side. And there's a program called Super PET MemTest. And it will run on the 6502 side, but it's actually analyzing the Super PET board. And so when you run it, it will produce a screen like this. And if there's any errors, you're going to get an X depending on where the location is. Well, I've done a bunch of experiments, and I found that so if the X is showing up at certain locations in column 0, it's U22. If it's column 3, it's U25, column 6, et cetera, et cetera. So by just running the program and seeing which column is giving you an X meaning there's something wrong with the memory, well, now you have an easy chart to read to show you which IC to change. Okay, here we go with the manuals. So I've created 2 manuals. The first manual is this one here, which is the 3-board version, which has it's a Super PET board with the 8032, but it has 2 additional boards. So the 8032, then there's the first board and the third board. So it's kind of like a Big Mac kind of sandwich. It's all stacked up. A manual for that. And then the next manual is a 2-board, which has the 8032 board and this board that sits on top. And this is where I spent most of my time on the manuals. This one, I did do some work on it because Dave has the board. It was defective. I ended up fixing it, but I couldn't do as much as I wanted with it because I need more boards to repair. So the more boards that I get to repair, then I'll be updating these manuals. I want to thank Chuck Hutchins. He has his own YouTube channel. He's very knowledgeable about Commodore PETs. And Dave, of course, David Bradley, wonderful David Bradley. He provided his boards and another 8032 board, which was from a Super PET because it had the mods. Without that, then I wouldn't be presenting today. So you wonder, why is it not working? I don't know. So yeah, check out their channels. There's the link here. I'll provide a link. So there's the link for both David. Oh, that's mine. Sorry. Let me go back. Should be there. Yeah, they're there. They're just not highlighted. So apologies for that. And yeah, that's basically it. So the manual, I printed off. I was going to print off copies to give away, but they're quite expensive. Let me just quickly, if I can, show you. Yeah, I have a new. I've added. So if you want to go and get the manual, just go to my GitHub page. It's on all my YouTube channels. You can just go there and click on the YouTube. I've also added a section which is not in the presentation because it's fairly new. And this section shows you when you have the Super PET side going, it's like, yes, it's working, everything seems fine. Well, I want to test the serial port. Well, how do I test the serial port? I don't know. I don't have a mainframe to plug into, or what can I do? So I created, well, you can find out there an RS-232 loopback connector. You can make with your own, or you can buy them. And basically you plug it in. It's like, okay, so I plugged it in. Well, what software do I have? I don't have any software to run to test it. Well, built into the Super PET, there's one of the options is called a monitor. And you can go in a monitor, and I explained how to do that. And you can actually then type on the screen. And if you're getting a double, like if you're typing the letter R, and you get a second R, you type the letter A, you get a second, you get two A showing up. That's talking through the serial port, going back to the loopback, and coming back to the screen. So you're actually seeing what you're typing in double, meaning that the serial port is working. I've also added another section that if you have a modem, so you have some kind of modem lying around that we're not using really nowadays, but you can plug it in and you can run commands, and the modem has information about itself. You can actually query that, so you can type an what was it, ATDT, and then a command, or ATNC01, and it will talk to the modem, say, hey, what are you? And the modem will reply back, hey, I'm a Hayes 2400 baud modem with blah, 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 blah. So that comes up on your screen. So then you know for sure, using either test, that your serial port is working without having additional software. So that's pretty neat. And what else? Yeah, so I'm adding to the manual as I go. I've already done 2 other Super PET board repairs, and for a guy, David Plummer. He has a YouTube channel too, Dave's Garage, and his is a newer version, revision D, which had no jumper wires on it. So it was quite interesting to work on different pets, and like I said, I'm updating the manuals as I go. So if you're doing a repair today, take a look. If you're doing one in a couple of weeks or a month, maybe come back and take another look to make sure if the manual's not updated. And that's pretty much it. It's a pretty short demo. Anybody have any questions? Or yes, sir.
If you met the original engineer who made this, what's one thing would cause you to want to buy that person a beer, and what is one thing that would cause you to want to punch that guy in the face?
Okay, well, the one thing is, let me see here if I can go to a slide. Oh, where is the slides? Come on. F5. Sorry, pardon me here. I'm just trying to get these slides to work. Hello. There we go. Okay, let's just go to this picture here. So on the Super PET, there are 3 ROMs here. If I can find that picture, let's see. Okay, so for the Super PET, all of them have the same version. 2 of them have the exact same problem, but all of them have similar problems in the sense that I guarantee you, when you have a Super PET, it's not going to work. If you buy it, it's like 99%, it's not going to work. And the reasons are this, and this is going to answer your question. One of the people who worked on this Super PET, his name is Trevor Grove, and I actually emailed him. I watched a video he made 7 years ago, but the audio was so bad, I couldn't. So I found his email. He worked at the University of Waterloo. And I said, hey, I've been working on this manual. I've been working on the Super PETs. And at minimum, one of the ROMs go bad. One of the ROMs. And then one of the ICs, U19, I think it's this one here, and U2, which is up there, they seem to go bad. And I said, based on my experiments and working repairs, I find it suffers from heat. And he says, exactly. He says, the problem with the Super PETs when they made them, that they ran so hot that they knew that if over time they're going to be coming back for repairs. And so I wanted to buy him a beer to say, hey, you've just confirmed my assumption here that this is one of the main problems. The reason to punch someone in the face, although not a very nice thing to do, but is that Commodore was too cheap to put in a fan. If they had put in a fan in the Super PET, it would have kept the air moving. I'm not sure if you're aware on the PETs, when the lid pops up like a car hood. On the edges, there's a small gap. You can actually feel underneath the sides of the PET. Well, if you have a fan inside, it would actually pull in cool air from the sides and blow it out through the top and out through the back of the monitor. So, yeah, if they'd put a fan of some kind in there, then they would have prolonged the life of these machines. Although I'm sure they didn't think we'd be talking about the PET in 2024, right? So, yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually building a kit for the Super PET, and one of them is this adapter. So there's a cable that plugs into the main board, the 8032 board, and this where the CPU sits. Because the CPU, you pull it off and it sits up here, and there's a cable that plugs in from the top, and it goes around and down onto the. So it's like this. It plugs into your socket where the CPU is, and this cable goes on top. It plugs into the very top there. Now, the cables are they're very hard plastic, and the pins are very, very thin. So by unplugging and plugging things in, or just age, they tend to break. And there's no one that I've seen out there that actually sells that cable. So I've decided this is my prototype. This is an actual adapter that will plug into your Super PET. So if that cable breaks, you can get this adapter. This is a straight through cable. You just plug that in like that, and then you plug that in your computer and you plug it in and off you go. So that's one thing. I'm thinking I'll be calling it the rescue kit, because if you don't have that cable, then your Super PET's not going to work anymore. And the other thing is I'm designing and working on is I'm putting an adapter on here. I'm going to get a 3D printed adapter that has like an arm that hangs over. So think of something just kind of hanging over here with a small fan on it. It's a 12-volt fan, but we're running at 5 volts, so it's running a lot slower, a lot quieter, but it's enough to get the air to flow over the ROMs and then out. And same thing with the two CPUs. It'll basically have the air moving around the PET, and then allowing you to run your PET for longer. Because if you're on there for like a good half an hour, you're gonna start getting errors because these get so hot you can't even touch them. On my PET, I've actually put heat sinks on all three, and I've put heat sinks on the 65 and the 6502 and the 6809 processor just to keep them cool. You can buy an adapter. I have a couple of adapters that I've put in. One of my ROMs was bad, and I put in an adapter so you can burn an EEPROM, put in the adapter, and then it just plugs in. But heat sinks are definitely recommended on these three. This one, kind of, I'm debating with that, but yeah, the CPUs and these definitely need it. And that's the main problem I'm finding with the Super PET repairs, is that all of them suffer from multiple repairs. My Super PET that I got, almost half of the chips on this board were bad. I don't know why. I think something happened because the 8032, the main board was damaged too. It had over 15 ICs that were damaged. It looks like it wasn't hit by lightning, but it looks like somehow through the RS-232 port in the back, something happened. Maybe it had an external, let's say an 8050 drive or 4040, whatever, and it had a short of some kind, and it passed that voltage through to the PET. But mine had the wrong 8032 board and didn't have the mod, so I think someone blew up a computer. So they'll just take it out of this one and just did the old swapperoo and then got their PET working, not realizing that the board they put in Super PET was not compatible because it didn't have the mods. So it's a long story. Hopefully that answered your question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
How much of the heat problem would be mitigated if you just replaced all the RAM and ROM? Like, could you make a modern solder card that would
To replace this whole board? Yes. The problem though is that even if you made a modern version of this board, you still have a heat problem. It's because of the clocks. It's running too fast. So you'd have to basically take the crystal out of it and slow it right down to reduce the heat. It's just running way too fast for it.
if you have like modern like flash ROMs, do those
Those would probably get warm too. Yeah. I think that you have to underclock the CPU on this, right? I mean, you can always add water cooled technology if you wanted to. Stick it in a fish tank or something. That'd be kind of cool, eh? The hydro pet. So really, the easiest thing is just add heat sinks. I've added heat sinks to mine, and the temperature dropped down by over 10 degrees Celsius just by heat sinks alone. And with the fan running again, it's very slow running fan. Yes, but I'm right now, like I said, I'm building a bracket that I want to 3D print a bracket that would basically you have so many holes here, you just make an adapter that would screw in the bottom, and it would basically hang over the board about here, and the fan would just blow the air across, and that would, if with the fan you might not even need the heat sinks. I have to experiment that, but I'm a big fan of putting heat sinks on stuff because you never. Right. Yeah. The heat sink actually, the heat goes into the heat sink, and because it has the fins, the air will go through it and actually cool it more efficiently. Yeah, you're right. That's really the optimal way to do it. Now, if you're a purist, well, you can't put them on, you can't do heat sinks, you can't put a fan. Well, that's fine. Then if that's the case, then make sure you get my email address. I do repairs. I'm more than happy to repair your Super PET. Or if you want, then just help yourself and download the manual and do it yourself, and then let me know if you find anything else that's wrong, because I would love to keep updating this manual as I go. Any more questions? David, you have a question?
When I got this
Yes.
and brought it to you, you
Yeah.
said something.
No, I didn't.
You said something, and you were so happy.
Yes.
What was that?
So when I got the pet from David, I was so happy that it wasn't working, because I thought, oh, I can make another video on this. Yay, it's awesome. Let alone that I realized that there was so many things wrong with it. It's like, and I didn't have any documentation other than the schematic. The schematic isn't very big. And at one point, I actually memorized the schematic because I was working on it so much. I actually did a full trace of every single component on the board to make sure that there wasn't a broken trace or a missing trace, like someone had cut. So up here, I don't know if you can see this, but it's got two cut traces there. There's some on the back. This jumper wire was missing. The capacitor had gone on it. All the 4 transistors were gone. So there's so many things wrong, and I couldn't find anyone or any document on the net, and it really just drove me nuts. And that's why I lost all my hair. It's just like, what the heck? And poor Dave had listened to me complain. How's it going today? He said, not very good. Why? I said, that's repetitive. I throw it in the garbage. But don't, it's so nice.
It was more of a roller coaster than that, because there would be good days.
Yes, there would be good days. Yes.
It stopped working.
Like, and so I learned quite a bit on it. And like I said, that's why I created the manual, because I don't want anybody else to lose their hair. It's a very sad thing. So I created the manual. It's free on my GitHub page, and it's from all the things I learned. And the reason I created the manual was, one is to share with everyone else, but two is I'm gonna forget. Like, you ask me like in 6 months from now, what was this error? It's like, I don't remember, but now I have a video and I also have a manual. It's like, oh yeah, this is how you do it. And it worked out well, because the last 2 Super PETs I repaired, I had them both fixed in 30 minutes. So, and before that, it would take me like almost 3 months to figure out what was what. So, I was very happy when I got it that it actually wasn't working, because if it was working, I wouldn't have learned all this information, wouldn't be able to share my findings. I'm happy it's done. Let's put it that way, because I was dreaming about schematics for like months, and it was not fun. The nightmares. Oh, the horror. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay, well, I think that's about it. Thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate it. And, yeah, thanks. Thank you.